I'm joined by our crisis correspondent, Spartacus Mills. Spartacus, this is huge history happening, isn't it?
It's bigger than that, Chris. It's large. I mean, if you've got a history book at home, take it out, throw it in the bin. It's worthless. The history books now will have to be rewritten.
What will they say?
They'll quite simply say, John Major punched the Queen. Everything else will be a footnote.
A push for time. Can you sum it up in a word?
No.
A sound? Spartacus, thank you.
Time to have like production discussions is during like any recording, like the actual thing.
I don't know. I was always thinking I should probably always end the show, but I definitely don't need to always start the show.
How do you reach that conclusion? Like in both cases, why is it important in both ways?
Just to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. It just it's a
you
thing
just
I like saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair. This is Silly Wales. This is a mental health podcast, largely mental health. We also talk about lots and lots and lots of other things. I'm Joe. Alex Cupid's the other one who is arguing with me like we're a married couple.
Because we are.
This is a show for everyone, but it may not be for you. That just simply means that realistically, we talk about some dark shit sometimes when ultimately it's actually, not always the case. But we're inclusive and we try to be, and so everyone is allowed to watch it. We're not going to stop you. We're not going to come around to your house and do shit like that. It's been a long time since we actually called back to the initial thing where we just every single intro we started by saying how we were too lazy to basically chase after people. But it's still true. And in fact, I'm busy now because I'm working a full-time job temporarily, but I'm working a full-time job. So, which has been an experience.
Yeah, boys and girls and everybody in between and around. Yeah, you nailed that.
Upside down. Yeah, I thought it was okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't really thinking
easy.
about it.
But there's, just like me, there's not much to think about. We like to have fun.
Yeah. It's funny. Like I keep saying, like it's funny how it's funny how when you sort of enter into spaces like this where you do public stuff, or even just forget about public stuff. Now that we're sort of making a thing, and we want that thing to be a certain way. God, this is going to get me talking about art suddenly, but like our basis for how we do this is watching other people do it, and I don't think we're so original or making something so extraordinary, or we're not making this in such a different way, in such an an original way that, I mean, this is a podcast for God's sake. It's only so original. That we're taking a lot of inspiration for how we engage with this. Obviously, I'm inspired by the way you do the intro. I didn't do it quite the way you did it, but in a similar vein. But it's funny because you just kind of get into a groove of just doing the thing. Like, I mean, we're just arguing about whether we should have and that's that as like a thing, as a way to, from the like intro to the intro, should there be something in between? Like, it's just all this like nonsense like that. But it comes up. I watched a video by JDF Signifier. Is it JD Signifier or JDF? I keep saying JDF in my head, but I think it is just JD Signifier.
I thought it was FD. That's how bad it is.
Oh, is it FD Signifier?
I don't know.
I'm actually going to look this up live because I need to know. Either way, while I'm looking this up, FD Signifier. Fuck me. I got it somewhere. I got I had the F in there, but the J is just non-existent. I think I'm just doing it as self-insert. I think. He came out with a video recently, and he came out with a couple of videos recently. I haven't seen one of them, but he came out with a video recently, which was, I think, titled something like "I understand edgelords now," or something like that, or "I finally understand edgelords." I watched it. I think it's good. I would recommend people watch it. I'm not going to give a full explanation of the entire thing. I personally do like FD Signifier's content. He's done the stuff I think I like the most are areas of kind of sort of things like how like black representation perhaps and things like that, as well as as well as like lots of his content specifically on like young men, because it's something that we've kind of chatted about. I don't know how much we have chatted about on the podcast, but not necessarily in the most as like I think, in fact, I remember us saying that we were going to do a presents episodes on this eventually. But he was basically doing it on that like sort of the young men online culture. And he was using like films and media to kind of refer to this stuff, and honestly, like the whole thing I think was just packaged really well. And I think what comes out of it is that he isn't just trying to like, he's largely speaking trying to not take the piss, but I think he's reached a point where he's no longer kind of happy just purely being empathetic to the whole situation. Like he is kind of like, okay, guys, you need to shut the fuck up and you need to like listen and you need to be better or whatever. But ultimately, he still comes back to the empathy side because I think there's kind of a recognition that that's the thing that's not there. Like this is the thing that people aren't getting in life, and that's why they end up in these situations, or the paths they're going down leads them into a situation where the kinds of things that lead you to be like a more well-rounded individual, and so on somewhat non-existent in the spaces that they're in. And it's just like, okay, we need to, like, as much fun as it might be, it's actually sadder. I can't laugh at it. I can't laugh at them, because it's just sad in the end. And I very much like got along with what he was saying. And me and him at least are similar in that he and I both relate to the sort of young man online, and I think you do to a certain extent. Don't want to speak for you, but those kinds of people, like there's a certain like recognition of, oh, I could have been that sort of person. In that video that he kind of discusses essentially that not too heavily because it's not like that kind of video, but he discusses like art and the sort of purpose of a thing to exist. And I was thinking about this podcast, and I was thinking like, oh, what is the desire of this podcast? Like, what is the function of it? Like, what are we trying to do? And beyond what we've discussed before about having like a sort of journal, sort of like backlog of stuff that we could listen to ourselves, show people, like, maybe young people, or show to like our children potentially, if that's a thing. I think there's always this. We talked about it in one episode when we were talking about like how in spaces you can tend to have like a very dour and like very kind of like ultra like analytical, no fun idea, like to look at mental health problems and things like that in a way where it is like the analysis itself is depressing, or the analysis itself it feels like it doesn't have any sort of like spirit to it. And I think that is part of it. I think we want to have essentially a casual relationship with it, but in a very sincere way. Like, we want to be sincere about what we're saying, but we don't want to give it the, I don't know, maybe some level, we don't want to give it the power to prevent us from taking the piss out of it, I suppose. Like, that's kind of and it's, I think when you engage with people who have like mental health issues, one of the biggest things I notice at least is that more often than not, they tend to have very dark humor about mental health, right? They tend to have much darker humor about suicide, or darker, and all of these, any sort of topic that you can imagine, despite the recognition that these are things we don't necessarily want to engage in. The number of jokes about like, oh, but you would die, and it's like, oh, really? Is that so bad? Like, and that being like the punchline of to something. It's just like, that's normal. That just becomes normalcy, even though no one actually wants that to happen, right? And it's just the way of coping. It's just the way of doing things. So I was just thinking about that. It was just one of the sort of like things floating around my head a little bit with that particular episode. And I also wanted to shout him out on the podcast because I do like him. I think he's good. And specifically, especially if you are a young white man in particular, I suppose, but he does also include other people, that, it's some of his videos are probably quite useful if you've never heard like a sort of voice dissenting, like maybe some of the things that you think, like you don't have to agree, you don't have to like it, you don't have to agree with what he says, but just have a listen. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of his like videos, but I don't watch him. I'm not subscribed to his channel, for example.
Oh, neither am I. I
Like,
think I just get his videos when I check him out regularly. I think it's right.
yeah, like I don't. I think it's because I'm subscribed to Foreign Man in a Foreign Land, who does very similar videos, very adjacent, and I think they do collaborate quite often as well. So it's like a very like I'm in the same pipeline of that stuff. Yeah, his stuff is pretty. It's pretty good. It's pretty chilled out. I can't complain about it. I think we've definitely discussed his videos before on the show. Actually, come to think of it, I think we may have discussed the Kendrick Drake one.
I thought we discussed the Kendrick Drake one privately. I don't think we recorded it. I don't think we recorded that discussion particularly.
He's been brought up in the show before, though, for sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, but I thought that one in particular was good, and I wanted to again, there are some things where I think or actually, this is another way of saying it. There are lots of people who are like, oh yeah, that is clearly a bad thing, but don't understand why, or don't understand like how to empathize or see like there's something about knowing that something is bad, like knowing that something bad exists in the world and having no context or understanding for why it is the way it is, and therefore being able to like kind of other or belittle or joke or bash, and kind of remove the remove the person from the thing, like so you make the demon or you make the monster out of them, rather than recognizing that people do bad things not just because there's something different about their brain, but most of the time that's something that can be changed. Like everyone's brains are doing different things when some different thing is happening, right? Largely speaking. Like, if I don't want to get too fundamental, philosophical or scientific about it, but like, if you know that doesn't mean that somehow but because we know we're not robots, so we know that like a person doing that isn't just doing that like purely off of a code that can't change or anything like that. But we also know that a person doesn't have are not entirely free to just do whatever they want, So when a person does something, they're not making a decision because they know that that it will cause you harm, or they're not making a decision because they know that they're saying the wrong thing. No, they probably think that it's beneficial to you, and they probably think and they might even, there are times where people are just straight up selfish, don't get me wrong, but they're probably thinking that they're right, they largely speaking, or
even a lot of
like,
this comes from righteousness.
Yeah. Like there's always a reason. They have a reason, and they think that they're in the right space. So there's no particular I don't think there's a platform basically for just kind of. Sorry, let me be clear. I think there needs to be a platform to critique and recognize things, much in the way that I think you and I can sort of talk about, but then have fun over. You can sort of have the opposite, where you recognize something's bad, but then like have empathy for, like you need to have
the
both,
discourse is dying though. Like discourse is dying in the way because of the methods in which we do it. Like if you look at the biggest discourse like platform, which has the most I guess direct consequences to us as people, that'll be Prime Minister's Question Time on Wednesday. And it's a big old shouting match. It's very much I'm going to score a point here. I'm going to, sound really cool here. I'm going to win this part of the debate here. I'm going to question the Prime Minister on this thing. And a lot of it is very, performative in a way. So, and in reality, a resolution to something doesn't come from question time. It's
Right,
a point made. Points are made, and points are won, and points are lost. It's like now we have clips of question time. So a lot of it is just based on the idea of like, what looks good. But that's like, prime time, like television in a way. Like, because everyone's waiting for a zinger to come through. And it's a shame that actual political discourse has been dying slowly as we now go further in time. And now we have social media where it's pretty much the same thing now. Like, how many YouTuber debates have you seen, or live streaming debates have you seen, where it's like very little conversation actually happens because it's just like, you said this in 2003, or you said this in 2015. And yeah, and no one actually argues the point. Like, I've been, I'm going to get political here. A lot of streamers are bad people. We know this. And like,
I don't know. Well, yeah.
And it's
Sorry.
okay, and it's very much is okay. Like, I'm not going to say, oh my god, you have to be like a moral human being. No, no. Like, it's everyone's an asshole to somebody, so it's impossible. I legitimately think it's impossible to have a quote unquote clean record. I think someone's gonna hate you enough to either lie about you, say something about you, or remember something about you from doesn't matter how far back ago it was. Like, some of the things I've seen people get cancelled for, I say cancelled. Don't really believe in cancel culture. I mean more shunned away for a brief moment. It's been increasing in stupidity. And then there's some things where you go, wow, how is that person still like able to provide an income for themselves and their family after saying these things? Quote unquote, the president of the United States. I said quote unquote, I meant for example. The issue that I've been like learning a lot about is how pro Zionist hello a lot of like certain streamers are, and the things that they've said and how little consequence they've had to receive. Like, I can, it's not gonna come back on us really, is it? Like, guys like H3H3 and Destiny, and they've said some awful things. They've like fully advocated for, we can call it this, a genocide. And they've, been recorded saying awful things. They've been recorded supporting awful things and awful people. And their mindset is, I'm going to stick my fingers in my ears and go, la, 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 la. You think I'm kidding? Watch it. It's literally that. They engage with what they need to engage with. They hide themselves in a little echo chamber, and their fans, dependent on their loyalty, will always ride with them. So now you have loads of people who are incredibly pro-Zionism and incredibly pro-genocide because their favorite streamer is. And their current thinking, and this was what's always said, regardless of the opposition, so this could be someone who's pro-Palestinian and someone who's like a racist, that their audience's thinking is everybody else is sheep and we have our own individual way of thinking. We're going our own way. And I find it really weird because at its very core, bad things are happening to innocent people. And it's very clear to see that innocent people are being killed, maimed, and are suffering. Regardless of political views, you can see that and you should be able to say, that's wrong. The fact that you can't do it tells me that you're not thinking, because you're not willing to even look at the fact that that is a really bad thing. You're not willing to look at the fact that, hey, I might have a viewpoint as to why these things are happening, but at its core, this is a bad thing. No, instead you are outwardly saying, this is a good thing. And you're doubling down, you're tripling down. You're denying numbers, you're denying facts. Even if things are right in front of you, you're going, this isn't true. And then you're sticking your fingers in your ears and you go, la, 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 la. I find it incredibly, incredibly fascinating how easily we just completely gloss over certain things. Like, I'm saying, a Minecraft YouTuber did this really bad thing. Yeah, okay, that's pretty bad, it's pretty bad. But the biggest streamers in the world are currently advocating for a genocide and we're kind of letting it go. But, but they're never held to rights because they stick their fingers in their ears. They never debate anybody who will actually contest with what they're saying, rather than throwing words at them and throwing accusations at them. They never debate with anybody who will like intellectually go toe to toe with them. So it's very much a very well rehearsed thing of we can keep doing this and no one can stop us. And it's really shit and it's really annoying. I have no actual resolution for this. I just wanted to speak about it.
It's actually, this is, you're gonna hate this, but it was funny. Before you started talking about Destiny, I was literally, and I don't want to talk about this like a super amount. I just because I don't think it's like worth it. I don't think it makes sense for the podcast. But I saw I don't remember when this came out actually, but I saw there was a debate between. Do you know Matt Dillahunty?
No.
Okay. He was actually one of the biggest. He was part of the atheist experience in Texas.
Sorry, that's also no for me.
And it was basically a call show, and like people could call and talk about religion and explain. Like, and basically there are lots. You know, he was going to be a pastor at one point, and then he became an atheist and other things like that. But it was a debate between Matt Dillahunty and Destiny talking about abortion, and they were coming at it from different from their reasons for why they are pro-choice was based on different things, and they were kind of talking about that. So they were on the same side of that debate, but they were on different platforms or pillars for why they were on that side. And that was a really good conversation. Like, and it's funny because when you started talking about like discourse, I remember thinking about, I'm sure you can watch this on YouTube, but there was and I think this was live because I guess it had to be because it was on, I imagine it was on television. Because otherwise, why would they record it the way they did? I have a debate between Michel Foucault and Noam Chomsky in probably like the 1970s or something. And it is funny looking at some, and I should be clear, I personally do not have the take of that now is the time where there's lots of issues around how people are in politics. I largely just think that our information gathering is in the worst possible state, not because we are any different at information gathering now than we used to be, but merely that there's so much more information that is coming out of nowhere and is actively like harmful, right? So I think it's more so the state of the information that we're engaging with, and that we have not matured in terms of how we engage with information. I think like fundamentally, like from a mental health angle, there's so much you could talk about in this. But I do find it interesting when I look back and see that particular debate and think they are disagreeing about things, but you couldn't tell if you were using like the metric that you would use today, watching some streamers interacting with each other, or some, or using, or looking at some YouTube video essays, for example. Because the purpose of these, because they're too dramatic and shit. Like Alex O'Connor, who has had Destiny on his podcast, by the way, and on his YouTube. I really like Alex O'Connor for multitude of reasons, but like a lot his like podcast stuff, which is like very like kind of interview style with like where he's playing somewhat devil's advocate a lot of the time and things like that, like probing ideas as well as like just interacting with them. He is like, it's very dry, and I personally have come to, I don't think it's an age thing. I think it's actually like the fact that I've become so over like I don't have the word for it, but there's so much I've seen of like this kind of like this song and dance like shitty version of discourse that doesn't even have like any of the hallmarks of really of discussion or anything, that when I see his stuff where there's kind of this more like actual attempting to go back and forth and have a real discussion, that it fills me with like a sort of like whatever the opposite of the word brain rot is meant to imply, right? Like it's so good at making you to me it's all the only word I can think of that makes sense is like wholesome, but it's not wholesome necessarily what they're talking about. It's just it feels wholesome. It feels cozy in a way that like by comparison to how media is choosing to portray like discourse and discussion and things like that, it really isn't. And it's so much this shouting match and stuff. And again, just a point to show that this is the case. If you've ever seen like about my point about like how this has always been kind of the case, if you've ever seen like because my dad has always seen these on TV, like growing up I used to see it on TV. You'll have like members of parliament, like, you know, you'll see the houses of parliament, like the chamber, and people are fucking animals sometimes in there. Like like people are so ridiculous in there, so performative, so like, and specifically like the audience and the way they interact with it and stuff like that. And it's like the most bullshit like thing that like there's a member of parliament. It's a thing that there's someone elected in that position who's like is just like shouting crap or like, you know, or
It's a
just
very
going,
emotional thing,
yeah,
isn't it?
it's so weird. Like you would think that like there would be something better. Like you really think like there would be something better than it. And people watch it and agree with me and you that it's so bizarre. Like it looks so stupid, right? It looks so like it feels like there is it feels like there is a shouting match. It feels like you're, well, I'm going to be real. It's like being at school. You know, it looks like you're looking at Eton College, right? Like because that's what's happening, right? Like that's what so many of these people are kind of from. And so that's why you have this like bizarre thing where you have these people that seem so immature despite them being in their like 50s and 60s. And, you know, that's incredibly despairing, like for, you know, for that being it, like that you're just having these shouting matches and truly there is actually no discourse occurring. Anyway, I want to get away from this hot topic if that's okay, because it's just
Sure.
Yeah, because
I want to talk about something. It's been a week.
it's
I
been
went to see.
quite a while, to be fair, since we last recorded. So
It's been one whole week.
oh, is it really? Oh, okay. I genuinely thought it was longer than that. I'm working now, so you know.
Yeah, life travels for you. I went to see the band InMe. They've been mentioned on the show before. Great band. Ryan, hello Ryan, couldn't go because Ryan got injured. Ryan got hit by a car, as I mentioned a few weeks ago. Soon. He can walk.
Hey.
But he had one request, or two requests. One was to video InMe performing the song Ruins, and the other one was to tell the guitarist that he did a really good job. I could only really do one, and that was record Ruins. So I recorded the song Neptune for him as well. And Jesus Christ, oh no. I have this view of people videoing themselves at concerts and videoing a concert. And there's a view from that I probably just took from somebody else, probably a comedian, of like how you're wasting the experience if you're videoing it all the time. And how like there's no point to put your fucking phone away, enjoy it. And then as I was recording it, I saw lots of other people recording it as well. Not because I was doing it, because they also wanted to capture the experience. The guy to my left was recording the entire show. He had a fucking those like selfie sticks thing as well. And he was holding it, and he was like holding it up, and he was propping his arm up with his other arm, and he's doing that for the whole like set. And it was impressive. And I was thinking to myself, is he enjoying the show? Because he's just standing there, still as possible. And something hit me because I had to bring an additional friend because Ryan couldn't make it. So I had to swap out one older man for another older man. That sounds terrible. That just has a terrible sentence to make. Anyway.
No. Get it, mate.
It hit me. We kind of should all stop judging people's experiences and focus on our own experiences because everyone enjoys things differently. And not everyone wants to sing and scream band's lyrics, just want to really be captivated by it and enjoy it. And I find it really interesting how the idea I had in my head about myself was that as I get older, there'll be an urge to become more conservative in my mindset and more conservative in my beliefs, conservative in my actions and emotions. But the opposite is actually happening where I'm like, I want to be more, I don't know, exuberant maybe. That could be the right word. That is probably the right word. I want to be more expressive. I want to be more even explosive in how I feel. But that is a self thing rather than everyone else thing. I don't want everyone else to be like that as well. I don't care. I actually want people to react naturally to everything around them rather than feeling like they have to be something or somewhere. Like, there was a mosh pit at InMe show, and I say a mosh pit. There were people jumping around. I don't know what a mosh pit actually is.
No, I get you.
Okay,
Okay.
and
That's what I meant.
I had a feeling of wanting to be in that, and Ryan's name is the mosh pit daddy. I think I gave him that nickname. I'm gonna take credit for it for now. But if, like Drake, I get sent some form of legal letter, I will be running away very quickly. I truly think that the idea of a mosh pit sounds so cool, and I really want to get in one. So that's an aim for 2025.
Nice.
The show was fucking great. InMe was fucking great. The band before them, Scarlet Riot, also really good. I really enjoy how we can celebrate other people's happiness and success. So their singer has had like issues of substance abuse and alcohol, and he's like 17 months sober today, and it's really good, really, really good to hear that. And it also brings you warmth to your heart to see someone progress in their lives in a really positive way. And it also is really beneficial when their songs were written in times of, one could call it crisis, one could call it hardship, and performing the songs actually brings them a sense of useful pain because it puts them back in that space of where they were in their lives. And here's like a really weird thing, because the singer Dave, he was like, yeah, I wrote this song when I was like 15 in 1998. And I turned to my mate Michael and I said, I was 1. Michael was like, just left secondary school, Jesus fucking Christ. And when I said I was 1, I don't think I've ever felt more like I might be attacked than that moment. Like 3 or 4 people slowly turned their heads to me. And they were like, the fuck. Like, I think what happened is I kind of made everyone realize that they're old. And then I realized something too. When I'm coaching, when I'm doing anything with young people, know their date of birth, I remember the game that I had at the time. So if someone's born in 2006, I'm like, when you were born, I was playing Pro Evolution Soccer 6. And I've realized there's some kids whose songs from FIFA I've learned to love and like worship. And I just constantly listen to. And these kids weren't even born. So like there's a song from a game, FIFA 06, and it's by Shiny Toy Guns. And it's called You Are the One. It's one of my favorite songs. You probably heard it in our Spotify jams. And Joe, one of the kids said, why do you listen to this music? I said, because it's from FIFA, don't you know it? And I realized he was born in 2008. He has no idea. Because it's not like it's a thing, oh, well, kids, doesn't matter how old you are, you should know this song. No, they wouldn't, because literally the only reason why people know this song is from FIFA. So if he didn't play FIFA 06, he wouldn't know the song at all. and you're just like, what do you do? And you start thinking about yourself. You start thinking, fuck, 27. And there's people who just won't know things. And you won't know things because you're just old. And
so obviously, it took me a long time to get to the point where I was like feeling old, so to speak, which I haven't actually ever felt. I've merely just working in the shop. You have to know like what date of birth is okay for someone to get alcohol and things like that. So you'll come across someone and it's like, oh, you turned 18 last month, but obviously what you're looking for, oh, were you born in 2006 before and like, were you born around that time? If you are, you can have alcohol now. Well, depending, unless you were born in December. And it's like, that's something you just kind of like, that was the moment I think where I was like, oh, that date is so close to when I was about to go to secondary school, right? Like I was so close. I was at, there is a significant age difference there. There's a 10-year difference for me. a decade of difference between me and this person, and it's like, oh, okay, that's it. I feel like growing up with kids, though, like having to like being like the oldest of a lot of different children around me has meant that from my family, from outside from my close family, my extended family, and then outside the family, because of all the children that keep coming up, I've always like felt that that's true. I've always had that experience of like, oh, well, this person doesn't know things, right? This person just doesn't understand, and I have to teach them. I have to make them learn, right? And I don't know, like for me, and maybe this will never change. I don't know. I like the experience of knowing that there's someone, like especially knowing that there was someone who appreciates something I appreciate, who is significantly younger. I find that to be such a gift to me personally. Like when Naima likes Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? when
Yeah.
when she likes that thing, that is amazing, right? Like that immediately signifies to me, like, that there is something good about what we like, right? And it crosses, a significant amount of time. It crosses about 16 years of time between us, right? And if there was someone 16 years older than me that also liked it, that would be great. Like, and there are people who are more than 16 years older than me who like it. And I'm so glad, like I really like it. That is such a like a again, it's not like a core thing. It's just one of those. It's just one of those things where it's like, okay, so there is there are these things in life that we do and that we care about and we love, and it's the fact that it isn't so. And we have historically always been in a position where life doesn't change so much that the things you like and have experienced are probably things that your child or your grandchildren are going to also experience, right? They're going to experience the same stories, the same songs, similar lives as you. There will be differences, but there are going to be a lot of similarities. There isn't necessarily going to be a huge change of in the world. We're living in a slightly different stage now, where things are changing much more rapidly. As a result, I think this is a very new, modern idea, really, that anyone kind of cares about that age thing, for me personally. And for me, anyway, because I've had so much interaction with young people in that way, I've always found that not to be the case. I'm actually surprised with you because you have interacted with young children through your work and through like through your work in lots of different places. So I find it strange almost that you haven't had that like level of moment more regularly, or that you've had it come up more often. But I guess when you were like 16, you weren't interacting with like 8-year-olds and stuff as much, right? Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you were. Yeah.
Yeah, I was. Like, I think the issue is that I've always had a very young feeling. So I get ID'd for Cancer Monster still.
You're also the baby of your family, right?
A baby of my family. I'm also the baby of our friendship group.
Yeah, by less than a year. But yeah, I get you.
But categorically, I've always been like, for example, when we were in school, I was technically should have been the year below. Like, it's just circumstance that I was in the year I was in. And there was a time in school where people were like, yeah, but like he hasn't matured in the same way as like his peers because he's a bit younger. I was like, doesn't make a fucking difference. Like, but in reality now, like I'm learning, I'm doing my fucking like degree thingy in child and youth studies, and you start to look at and you go, yeah, actually those months are pretty crucial because those individualistic of how we develop, how we mature, that time frame still exists. It's why you have two kids and they're both the same age, but one might grow like a couple of inches or the other one just stays the same because it's individualistic, but it'll still happen. Just when is it going to happen? So that little bit of difference means a lot because you don't know when the gross what's going to happen. The kid might wake up and have a mortgage, who knows? Like, these are the things that happen with growth.
You might still be growing in your 20s and 30s.
Yeah, like me. Like, even I'm having it now because these are things that I haven't experienced fully yet because my first beard is a terrifying experience. Like, I don't have one. So I woke up today and there was like lines on my face. What the fuck is this shit? And I realized it's little bits of hair. And I'm like, oh shit.
Holy shit, you done it.
I'm like, it's not good. It's terrible. It's really patchy. It's not a beard at all. It's like, it looks like someone stabbed me with a Sharpie. A really thin one. And the other things I'm experiencing, like, you know, my height has been increasing the last couple of like years as well. Ever so slightly. And it's like, what the fuck is this shit? So now I'm faced with seeing like young people also mature. Now I've known them for like years at a time. And I'm seeing them like grow. And I'm just like, when I was your age, things were like this. And there's a connection you have with younger people where it's like, especially, I like to pride myself on having it where when I was a TA, I always understood the kids better than the teacher because I was not that far away in age, right? But now I'm at a point
Right.
where there's now a distance growing because yes, we might know the same things, but I don't know what a skibbity toilet is. Like, I don't know what Riz actually means. I no longer know, like, what the latest pack side Ultimate Team. I don't play Ultimate Team. I don't. There's a distance opening up, and it's a good thing. It means that my mental maturity is like, you know, developed and I've grown away from that stuff. But also, well, I've grown away from the things that tempt you into being addicted to those things, and I no longer need to play this game. I don't need to do this thing. But it's a bad thing in that I also feel like I've like losing connection with my own childhood in a way because I can't look at EA Sports and play it anymore because the game feels toxic to me. And
Right, I suppose.
that childlike notion of just enjoying it without any sort of sense of meaning behind it is gone.
Yeah,
So I look at and it's like fuck. It's like, well, it's really cool that I now look at things in a very introspective manner, and I look at things from a sense of morality, and look at things from a standpoint of like, you know, being the best you can be from a mental aspect, a physical aspect, and all that stuff. But also, I would love nothing more than to just be able to do things without having to think about those things. And the last like few years have been really rough for that because it's been like I've always wanted to play a game of football without feeling like if I get injured, it might be the end of everything. Like I play football and I'm thinking to myself, fuck, if I get injured, I'm gonna miss out on training for Muay Thai, and then I'm gonna fuck. And then when I'm at Muay Thai, I'm thinking if I get injured at Muay Thai, then I'm gonna give it to coach properly, and then fuck. And everything hands in the hands of the balance. And it's like fuck. And that is what's like scary is as you grow older, consequences exist, which is why I really dislike when like this is where things get controversial. Everyone's a dick to somebody, right? No one has a quote unquote clean record. Everyone's been an asshole to somebody. Why? Because hurt people, and we all get hurt. So when I see like these like younger streamers coming up and like, tweets resurfaced from when they were 16 years old and they're 20 now, and it's like racist tweets where I'm thinking, bro, the leaps and bounds you take from 16 to 20 is ridiculous. Like you grow.
Potentially, yeah.
Like similar age range, sure, but you grow. Like the leaps and bounds you take from 20 to like 23, it's ridiculous. You are very different when you start uni to when you leave uni. Very different. I find it hard to hold somebody responsible for something that they did when they were in their teens and early 20s, when they're like 10 years in the future now, because they're not the same person.
Yes.
Like you kind of have to judge them now. Like if it's really, really bad things, you have to let them explain that they're no longer that person, but you can't hold them to that though, you know? It's really difficult to weave this line because people will be like, well, what about this example here? And I'm not focusing on examples, I'm focusing on the general idea of like, I don't know. I had a conversation with someone recently and they confessed that they had a really racist mentality when they were growing up. And they were like, I really didn't like you, not because of you, but because of your skin color. And I was like, fuck, Jesus, I didn't see that shit coming. And they were very much like, and it came from my upbringing. And it also came from the things I watched as a child and the things I watched as a teenager. And it was only when I like interacted with you and other friends who are like, you know, of different ethnicities, where the walls had to come down. Because I would tolerate your existence, Alex, but I wouldn't tolerate you wanting things because of your skin color. I couldn't tolerate that. And I said, oh, that explains a lot. And they were very apologetic, and we both had a cry over it. And I said, like, I'll be honest with you, I've kind of already let it all go. And they were like, why? Why? Like, God, I hate me for it. I said, yeah, you can hate yourself for what you did back then, but you can't hate yourself for it now. Look, we're sitting down outside of an expensive coffee shop, not drinking the expensive coffee, instead drinking our individual bottles of water, and we just discussed how we feel our lives are going and how our lives went. And in that conversation, you mentioned about how you think it's really important that voices from different backgrounds are represented. You said that without me even prompting it. You've changed. You've changed, and we should be celebrating the fact that you've changed. But we should also look back and go, hey, that's a point of growth. You recognize how bad that was. But you were young and impressionable, and things happen, but you change, you know? So I find, they listen to the show. Great.
Forgiveness is very, very necessary. Like, I think there's so many things I want to talk about now. The specifically, if we ever get into a conversation about morality, one, by the way, I find the thing you say about children is quite interesting, because you almost could, if you replaced the word children with evil, your sentence would still make just as much sense as before. Basically, that, you know, that if you're evil, like, and like, to be evil is in like to be selfish or things like that, just to not care about things. I wish I could not care about things. It's one of the reasons why, like, playing evil characters is quite an attractive proposition, because to play someone, I'm thinking about D&D, but to play someone or to act in a way that feels like, wait, you know, why is evil so desirable? You know, because being good is complicated and difficult. And then the other thing was like that. I'll go back to that. With morality, like, if we have discussions about morality, if we have discussions about what it is to be good, if we have discussions about how we should be, if we have discussions about how we should engage with one another around these subjects and have discourse and all of these sorts of things, forgiveness actually is an incredibly necessary discussion point, because and I think this is like the clear difference between sort of justice when we think about it, like now, like in I think a lot of modern thought around justice is much more in that camp, or wanting to be in that camp, than how it used to be if we're talking about like the medieval period and things like this. When you think about like the way justice is handled there, it's like, and I mean, I don't want to go. I'm not to put too much of a religious spin on this specific part, but like, you know, the idea of like the sinner, like, of the sinner, and like this sort of like need for redemption, or this need to kind of like burn out the sin and all sorts of things. Horrible things happen, by the way, just to be clear. But I just don't want to make it that about that. The desire for like this sort of justice is one of the reasons why, like, there's justice without a sense of like care and forgiveness for the individual, like now versus like previously, is one of the reasons why I think people find strong incentive not to stop, right? Because if you're going to suffer as the result of what you do, not of what you're doing, but of what you have done. And I think that there is a necessary like thing that needs to happen. There is a necessary like change that needs to happen. But in the case of your friend, they're not. This was, you know, obviously it might have colored actions they did in life, but they weren't like going around doing horrible shit, as far as I know. They weren't like, you know, actively causing suffering and harm to people of color and things like that. Like, it was something that they thought about, but the incentive of actually admitting that can feel very low, right? The admittance of this. And I actually heard an example very similar to this, like once upon a time when I was quite young. And the person said this, but also said like, you know, but felt the need to be really defensive about it, which caused it to sort of not be an apology, but caused it more to be sort of a like, but I've moved on from, so treat me well now, and like kind of in a way where it wasn't an attempt to be like, hey, I'm really sorry and things like that, like, or I used to think this way and I feel bad about it. And there are examples of not of in the case of racism, but other things where or people I've talked to on Discord and things like that, or people are like, oh yeah, like I used to be like one of those, my thoughts and stuff used to be like one of those people who was, you know, the super like anti, like, you know, I can't remember what the names for them were, but like the people that were the most like anti-progressive at that time, and also and just kind of like left sort of like dog whistling to the right, in my opinion, obviously, and all this sort of stuff. They said that, and I'm like, sure, a lot of people are in that space. A lot of people have felt that. I have like had moments where like stuff like that infested me. I don't think that it's like a thing that needs to, and you should almost feel bad about it, right? You almost should feel bad about it from the perspective of, if you don't feel bad about it, then you haven't learned that it was bad. Like you need to have this experience of feeling sort of mortified by your own past sometimes, like when you have realized the error of your ways. That there's kind of a need for that, and that need isn't for anyone else but yourself. It's not so other people can feel better. Obviously there's this idea of like wanting someone, you know, the idea of parole, where it's like, you know, where someone can come out early. The idea of, oh, if they look like, or if they seem like they feel bad about what they've done, then therefore that's something to, you know, then that makes a difference. And it's like, I guess so, but like ultimately the person is the one that needs to, like, ultimately it's not about how we view the person, it's about how the person views themselves. Like in reality, that's actually what matters. So you need to have that moment of like feeling humbled and feeling like, sorry if you can hear the dog, feeling humbled and feeling like of feeling like kind of a bit of sadness and like, you know, regret. Ultimately feel regret, like, you know, and come to the conclusion that, okay, I've done that. And then forgiveness is this entity that exists. People need to forgive you and you need to forgive yourself. And this all needs to happen. Otherwise, there really is no incentive to continue. There just isn't. There just isn't an incentive to face the error, because there just isn't like a feeling that you will be cared for. There's a feeling like that you will be shunned. And in many ways, to a certain extent, you're right for feeling like there's something wrong about that. Like there's something wrong about not being able to be accepted at a certain level, in my opinion, anyway. I'm not saying that everything has to. There are lines that we cross, and
Yeah.
if you and I were having like an actual discussion, like if I was doing really philosophical, like kind of trying to tickle you and be like, okay, so if someone did this horrible thing, how long until you felt that the actions that they did of when they did that no longer apply, right?
Well, it's
Is
for
there,
me,
you
it's
know,
not
and so on. But
like for me, it's not about the actions. Well, it's not really about the action. It's about what they've done with it since then. Like how they take it. Like if I use like my friend's example, I know that he like when he wasn't. I said he when they wasn't with us. He was very much like a vocal type of a racist. I know this from other people, and the thing is that like they know this show exists, and before this episode goes out, I will have a conversation with them as well. They did mention that they did say this is going to be in your little show, isn't it? I actually didn't think we were going to broach this up, but it comes up. So I actually knew his like issues with race for a while before because somebody else told me, with the idea that I would be really shocked about it. And I wouldn't want to hang out with him anymore. I keep saying him, them. Apologies. I looked at that person and I said to that person, they've changed because they are here and there's so much more benefit to them leaning heavily into the racial side that existed in them before. There's so much benefit for it. They could have a career as a grifter online if they wanted to. They could be in an echo chamber where their voices are amplified because they're surrounded by people who love to amplify those specific voices. There is a feeling of comfort and safety when you lean into hatred. That's why it's so easy to do it. There's a reason why we buy into things like the Andrew Tates and the Elon Musks and all that stuff, because it's comfortable. It's really comfortable.
It's simple.
It's simple, it's comfortable, but also it's easy. It's hard to challenge your preconceived notions. It's hard to challenge your beliefs. It's hard to challenge how you feel about issues and people and things. And I could see that this person was actively looking to learn about things, be it the questions that they ask, be it the conversation that they bring up, be it the way in which they interact with things in general. Like, this is in their past. This is when they were teenagers. This is when they were like early 20s. This is a part of them that they've had to learn to kind of grieve, understand why it existed, and develop from. And when the conversation was brought up between us and we had the discussion, there was a look of sorrow, you know? And I think that we all have that look of sorrow when we remember things that we've done that we don't want to remember, but we have to. I have it. I'm sure you have it.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
Where we stare at like a blank space, we go, "Fuck, I did that. I fucking hate myself for it." And I have a catalog of those things. That being said, if someone were to bring up something I did 5 years ago and say, "You did this 5 years ago," and depending on what it was, I'll be really annoyed. Like, because one, I've really developed past it. Two, I feel like the reason why it's being brought up is to not to highlight that I'm a bad person, but to highlight to everybody else that I'm a bad person, despite you person releasing it, knowing that things change and people change. And I truly, truly, truly wonder, again, these things are very individual based as well. Because I know that when this show gets big and massive, people will find this episode and be like, "Look, he's advocating for this." I'm not advocating for anything. It's very individualistic based, right? There's certain things that, at a point, they need to be investigated, they need to be looked into deeper. There's things that need to be thoroughly checked. There's rights that need to be wrong. Responsibility needs to be taken if it wasn't at the time. But for very innocuous things like people's mindsets, people's mentalities, when there's a clear change in attitude in that person, we kind of have to look and say, hey, they've developed as human beings since then. We kind of have to start to look at whether or not we're fostering an environment for that change to take place. Because the last thing you want is for someone to look at themselves and go, "I was terrible back then, but there's an incentive for me to stay terrible now because I'm just going to get completely lambasted for whatever reason, and there's no need for me to grow." And I always wonder that. Again, it's very individualistic based, so it's just a case-by-case basis. It's not one shoe fits all. Anyone can grow and develop. That doesn't mean that we have to witness it as well. Which is why I'm saying, like, I don't really believe in cancel culture, but I also believe that in responsibility and people's willingness to invest in you. Like, I don't want to invest in my time in Destiny or H2H3 because, like, I've never found them that interesting, to be honest. I think that, oh, this is going to be controversial. I put Destiny, H2H3, and Simon Jordan in the same category. They are what dumb people think a smart person sounds like. I don't really care about what they say, and I don't really care for their opinions. and I think that they thrive off of sensationalism, and it's not for me. And I'm okay with that. They've said some bad things. If they were to tell me that they've changed, or tell the audience that they've changed and they regret their bad decisions and the bad things they've done, I'll say congratulations, I'll move on. Like, but I don't need to see your change. And
Yeah.
that's okay. And that's okay. I have no point. There's no actual point to this.
I was going
I'm
to say an
interested to
example.
see.
I was thinking of an
So,
example. Sorry, there was an example that I was I'm trying to remember his full name, but Dan Harmon had like I think it was during Community, had like a bad interaction, like not just a bad interaction. He had done something bad. He used his like authority to make someone else's life miserable because they rejected him, I believe, or something like that. And he knows it. He's as in like he's now, he completely like recognizes that and realizes that he did something wrong. Because he got brought up in, I think, sort of the Me Too movement, I believe. And he now, like, there's interviews that you can watch of him literally talking about like what it's like to realize you're the villain and things like that. And you realize you're not the main character in your story. You were the villain in someone else's. And other things like that. And I think, and yeah, like and the funny thing is that from a personal angle, from my personal life, it's easy to, there's an ease I have with that because, as I've kind of said in last week's episode, I think, where I was talking about like, so I've been pathetic quite a lot in my life, so I can gather why people do things for pathetic reasons, which is partly a haha, but partly a truth thing. It's very much like a real place where that's coming from. Is that I just don't see. I just see that even the best case scenario of like, or I just see the situation in which someone who comes along and has the best like answers for everything, assuming that exists, like that they're like, that there is a group of people or a person who like who is talking about things that are just morally good, right, and so on and so forth, that we kind of we've found it, we've cracked it, but there still needs to be discussion to like disperse that information and get that across. Even if that's the case, how you do it matters. How we engage with people, how we do this matters. There's no world in which just being right is purely the right thing. Do you know what I mean? Like there's kind of that like weirdness of people's desire to be right is more desirable than their desire to be good. So
oh yeah, 100%.
even if they're right about what they're saying, they're still wrong in how they do. And that's kind of the struggle that I think we're facing more so. But I also think that we need that recognition needs to be somewhat self-imposed as well. That you have to have this thing for yourself. I mean, both on this, but also just with each other, we've talked about things that we've looked in on ourselves and thought about. And I mean, I'm making changes currently. I'll probably talk about it next time or whatever, because we're sort of getting to the end, because I need to do stuff. And of like changes I'm making now, and we'll see what it like looks like as I'm going forward. And also that there are things I've learned in the last month or two that have kind of changed my perspective in some way. Actually, it really is just like a month, which is crazy to think about. And there's just like, there's little bits in this last year of whether doing this has made a big difference to that, or whether this would kind of have come about anyway. It doesn't matter. There are lots of things that have changed, and I'm coming to an understanding of it all. And so much of that, when I think back to when I was younger and I did make some of these changes, the thing that caused me so much suffering and pain to myself was my incapability to recognize the faults in myself, and to be honest, way longer than just my youth. I'm just like kind of referring to younger years rather than I could argue this year I was like that still. And in fact, I probably always will be. There'll always probably be this kind of like level of judgment on my shoulder against myself like that. But the feeling that I have done this, I have this flaw, I've done something wrong, and literally not even being able to try to objectively understand that thing because you are so consumed by guilt or shame or and you almost have to repress your own ability to explain your faults to yourself or to other people because you don't deserve it. Like you don't deserve any of that because you recognize that something bad has happened. And sometimes, of course, you're wrong, that you haven't done anything bad and this is just all made up in your head. Or this has been you've been traumatized to think that this is that way or whatever. I've been gaslit like a bunch of times. I've told you about like stories that, of where you react in a very negative way to it, and I didn't at the time because I thought that they were right, and you were like, "What are you talking about?" And there's this very like strong emphasis, I think, from whether it be cultural or whether it be educational, to be perfectly honest, that we recognize the ability to not kind of stick to this kind of oneness of self and I guess egoistic interpretation of ourselves in order to kind of not feel like it is in our best interest to be like this kind of perfect like kind of statuesque temple to ourselves, right? That we have the ability to say, hey, that staircase is shoddy. That the foundations upon which you are is bad. You need to stop that. And I would like to be able to, and with other people and in social encounters, this is difficult. It's very difficult to have a discussion with someone and to show them the error of their ways. But when you're in your own mind and you're trying to show yourself the error of your own ways, the problem is that either you don't understand that, listen, that conversation's not happening, which happens all the time. We've all done that because obviously this doesn't happen as soon as you engage with information that shows you're wrong. You don't immediately tend to immediately go, oh, I was wrong. So so firstly, the conversation isn't happening because you don't think it's happening. You start having the conversation with yourself, and you're kind of and you either are going, well, yes, but you're doing the sort of like deflecting thing. You're doing the rationalization and self-justification so that it all makes sense. So you're having the conversation, but the conversation is not landing right because you're not letting it land. Then there's the point where you're starting to engage with the conversation a little bit more. Maybe you're going a bit more back and forth. Maybe you're unsure as to how you feel about the older things you used to think or the older arguments that you used to listen to. But then no, now here it is more attractive and I do agree with it, but this, and now you suddenly realize that maybe there's a point going both ways. And then eventually, as you go along, you reach a point where a decision essentially has to be made around, or it's not a decision necessarily that you can kind of just make in your mind. Like it's a decision that occurs, and that decision is so influenced by the social interactions around you, as well as like your own upbringing and things like that. But the social interaction is what I want to focus on for what we can do, like for one another, right? For the internal part, it's like, can I forgive myself? Or like, can I believe that I've believed, can I have this idea in my head and, go through the metamorphosis and recognize that once upon a time I was doing this and thinking this and I was bad. And now I realize how stupid I was. Now I realize that I'm wrong. Now I realize that thing I did, I regret. Now I realize, etc., etc., etc. Now I feel bad. I was the bully. I was the villain, etc. Then, and you can, and that's one option. And then the other option is there must be more to this. Then I can't make that that next step. There must be more to this, and there's also the element of, but there are things that I fundamentally believe that I can't let go of, and there is no way to there's no way to make the culmination of what I now sort of believe and what I fundamentally believe together. They diametrically oppose too much, and I haven't figured out the nuance of how these two things can be true at the same time. That's interesting because you can actually find ways in which those two things can be true at the same time. But that's the other part. And the social problem or the social influence is that if people around you or if people on the other side are in the position to demonize you, that to me is always going to win in making you not go in that direction. Like that you just will not be able to. You need to be in the position to recognize like, hey, yes, I agree with you that it's bad, but you need to be able to have someone say, hey, it's bad, but come on, let's have a conversation about this. Like I agree with you, it's bad. You and I both have this now agreement in this. Let's talk about it. There needs to be some sense to which people need to have some almost closure around it for themselves. And they almost need like a social validation to recognize that there has been a change, there has been a fundamental moving on, and that there is more to this than just, I just think it's very difficult on your own to do this sort of thing. And I think it's one of the reasons why, even though surely you should be able to like fundamentally like not judge yourself, or fundamentally you should be able to go, oh, I've realized I've done something wrong. Let me now do this thing, and let me now change my brain, because now I'm in this mode. I can just like switch my brain, and now I now believe this, and I can just discard the old thing. The reason why it's so hard to discard the old thing is because that doesn't happen. You are like throughout your entire life, you are everything that you are. There is never a moment where you're not the thing that you are, but you might not have been the thing you were, right? And that's the distinction. The distinction of there's no point in time where you're the same as any other point in time. That's the main fundamental difference. It's the main fundamental reality. And I just think that we as a whole need to try and do our best, even when we really don't want to, because it does happen that way, to make peace with. To make peace, I think, like just to make peace with the fact that there are things that we cannot, that we just will not engage, that we do not want to engage with about others, about ourselves, in order so that actual movement can be towards the right thing, can be towards the thing that is good, as opposed to like wanting to remain right, different kind of right with a small r, not a big r. Actually, I guess it depends which way around you want. Anyway, it's not about being true as much as it is about sort of being a good person, I think. And so there is a little bit there of like back and forth, I suppose.
Yeah. I'm gonna say this now because I feel like in a year or two, this podcast will be like, look at that, they advocate for this and this. We don't advocate for anything or anyone. We don't care. Like, it's not an example-based thing. It's just a conversation. And if you want to know true views on something, probably best just ask us, rather than taking quotes from this show. Yes, we'll give very in-depth feelings on how we feel about something, but again, a case-by-case basis. So if you go, what about this thing? Then our answer will probably be switched, referencing what that exact thing is, because things are different. Every case is different. Mm-hmm. We cannot, it's very, very rare in terms of when you talk about human beings that every single answer applies to everything. Generalization doesn't really work in that regard. Anyway, that's that. I don't think there's anything else. Anything else for you?
I love that now that's that is just going everywhere else apart from the beginning.
Exactly that.
Yeah, probably heavier than I thought this episode was going to be, like before sitting down. But like, I think next time we record, to be fair, there's been more time, so I think we're just like unloading. But next up, there's lots of stuff that's been happening recently that I'd love to talk about. Like, next time. So
yeah, this episode's going to be up pretty soon, by the way.
that's what I
Today
expected. Yeah,
is the 20th of November. You probably expect this episode up. You should probably be listening to this come Saturday. So
yeah,
the 30th.
Also, I will
Kendrick
say,
dropped.
oh yeah, he did. Yeah.
Sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was going to say, I genuinely do think we recorded like 2 weeks ago. Was the last time we recorded, but it's fine.
It probably was because there was a delay in the last episode going up.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. There's a lot of time. Kendrick dropped.
All right, Kendrick dropped. With that being said, we're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. We're in the wind. See ya.
Bye.